Commander Vextai stood in the center of the Grand War Council chamber. His massive form cast long shadows across the polished floor. The scars on his thick alien skin told stories of 100 battles across the galaxy. For 30 years, he had been the most feared warrior in the Galactic Defense Corps. Every species knew his name. Every enemy trembled when they heard he was coming. But today, something was different. Today, the great Commander Vextai was afraid. The 12 council members sat in their floating chairs around the circular chamber. Each represented a different species from across the known galaxy. The tall ones with their crystal bodies, the storm riders with their electric blue skin, the rock people from the heavy worlds. All of them had fought wars before. All of them thought they knew what fear looked like. They were wrong. Vextai held a small datapad in his clawed hands. The device contained reports from the outer edge of the galaxy, reports about a small blue planet called Earth, reports about creatures called humans. His hands shook slightly as he looked at the information again. Council members, Vextai began. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. I have seen many things in my years of service. I have fought the glass swarms of the far systems. I have battled the fire demons of the burning worlds. I have stood against the metal eaters who consume entire planets. The chamber was silent. When Vextai spoke about war, everyone listened. But I have found something new, something that makes all those enemies look like children playing with toys. He paused and looked at each council member. I have encountered the humans of Earth. Several council members made sounds of amusement. The leader of the Storm Riders, a female called Zephyra, spoke first. Commander, surely you jest. We have seen the reports about this Earth. The creatures there are soft. They have no natural weapons. No thick skin, no poison. No ability to fly. They seem quite harmless. Vextai activated the hologram projector. Images filled the air above the council table. The members saw humans walking in their cities, human children playing in parks, human families eating together. Everything looked peaceful and normal. This is what I thought too, Vextai said. When I first saw these images, I believed we had found another weak species. Another group that needed our protection from the dangers of the galaxy. I was very wrong. He changed the images. Now the hologram showed human soldiers. But even these warriors looked small compared to the mighty aliens in the chamber. Their weapons seemed crude. Their armor looked thin. Their bodies appeared fragile. Do not let their appearance fool you, Vextai warned. What you see is not weakness. What you see is the most dangerous predator the galaxy has ever produced. The council members began to whisper among themselves. Korthak, the massive representative of the rock people, laughed with a sound like boulders falling. Commander, with respect, these creatures weigh less than one of my arms. How can they be dangerous? Vextai's expression grew darker. Because they do not fight like us. They do not think like us. They do not live like us. Everything about them is wrong by our standards. And that wrongness makes them unstoppable. He moved closer to the hologram controls. Let me tell you about their planet first. Earth is what our scientists call a death world. The gravity is crushing. The weather is violent and unpredictable. The ground shakes and splits open. Mountains explode with liquid fire. The air carries storms that can flatten entire cities. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Death worlds were rare. Most species could never survive on such planets. The waters of their world are filled with creatures that hunt and kill. The land has beasts with teeth longer than my claws. Plants that can poison you just by touching them. Tiny creatures too small to see that cause diseases and death. Vextai paused to let this information settle in. Most species would die on such a world within days, but humans did not just survive there. They made it their home. They adapted to every danger. They learned to use every threat as a tool. They turned a death world into a garden. The Storm Rider leader spoke again. Even so, Commander, adaptation is not the same as being dangerous to us. Many species are tough. You still do not understand, Vextai said. His voice grew louder. I spent 3 months on their world. I fought alongside them. I watched them in battle. I studied their history. What I learned will give me nightmares for the rest of my life. He changed the hologram again. This time it showed scenes of human warfare. Explosions. Soldiers running across open ground while enemies shot at them. Ships burning in their oceans. Cities reduced to rubble. They have been fighting wars on their planet for thousands of years. Not small conflicts over resources or territory. Total wars. Wars that consume entire continents. Wars where they throw millions of their own people into death just to move their battle. lines forward by a few kilometers. The chamber grew very quiet. I watched human soldiers attack positions that were impossible to take. I saw them charge into certain death not because they had to, but because their leaders asked them to. I witnessed acts of courage that border on insanity. Bextai's voice dropped to almost a whisper, and the most terrifying part is that they do it gladly. They volunteer for suicide missions. They compete for the chance to face the greatest dangers. They consider it an honor to die for their cause. He switched the hologram to show human space programs. Rockets launching into the void, humans in primitive spacesuits working outside their ships. While they were still fighting wars on their own planet, they began reaching for the stars. They strapped themselves to controlled explosions and hurled themselves into space. They did this when their computers were less powerful than our basic tools. They accepted that many would die just to see what was beyond their world. The council members were no longer whispering. They stared at the images with growing concern. "But Commander," said Melodia, the beautiful representative of the Song people, "surely their primitive technology means they pose no real threat to our advanced civilizations." Bextai laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Their technology is primitive now, but do you know how long it took them to go from their first flight to landing on their moon? 66 years. In less than one human lifetime, they went from crawling on the ground to walking on other worlds." He showed more images. Human factories. Human laboratories. Human scientists working on new discoveries. They do not just use technology, they consume it. They improve it. They push it beyond what should be possible, and they do it faster than any species we have ever encountered. Bextai moved to the center of the chamber. "Council members, I have fought across the galaxy for 3 decades. I have seen every type of warrior, every kind of enemy, but I have never encountered anything like humans." He looked directly at each council member. They do not know when to quit. They do not understand the word impossible. They look at every obstacle as a puzzle to solve. Every defeat as a lesson to learn. Every loss as motivation to try harder. The chamber was completely silent now. When other species fight, they fight until victory becomes impossible. Then they surrender or retreat. Humans fight until victory becomes inevitable. They will lose 1,000 battles and treat each one as practice for the war they plan to win. Bextai held up the datapad again. "In my report, you will find detailed analysis of their biology, their psychology, their history, and their current capabilities. You will learn about their pack-bonding behaviors, their problem-solving abilities, their capacity for sacrifice, their refusal to accept limitations." He paused for a long moment. "And you will understand why I believe that humanity represents the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced. Not because they are evil, not because they hate us, but because they are human." The council members sat in stunned silence as Bextai prepared to continue his presentation. Outside the chamber windows, the stars seemed somehow less bright than before. 3 months earlier, Commander Bextai had felt confident about his mission. He stood on the bridge of his ship, the Iron Thunder, watching the blue planet Earth grow larger on the viewing screen. His elite team was ready for another routine peacekeeping operation. They had done this hundreds of times before. "Standard first contact protocol," he told his crew. "We identify the warring factions. We establish communication. We mediate a peace agreement. We file our reports and move on to the next system." Lieutenant Korvash checked his weapons. Sergeant Yalandra reviewed the landing coordinates. Both aliens had served with Bextai for years. They trusted their commander completely. This mission seemed no different from any other. The Galactic Defense Corps had received distress signals from Earth. The planet's electromagnetic transmissions showed clear signs of global warfare. 2 major groups appeared to be fighting across multiple continents. The signals indicated primitive technology and limited space capability, a perfect case for intervention. "Sir," Korvash reported, "our sensors show the conflict is concentrated in several regions. The largest battle zone appears to be in the eastern continent areas." Bextai nodded. "Set us down near the heaviest fighting. We need to make contact with both sides quickly." The Iron Thunder descended through Earth's atmosphere. None of the aliens had ever seen such a beautiful world. Blue oceans covered most of the surface. White clouds swirled in complex patterns. Green and brown land masses spread across the continents like artwork. "Hard to believe such a lovely planet could host a war," Yalandra commented. "All the best worlds seem to have conflicts," Bextai replied. That's why we exist, to bring peace to places like this. They landed in a forested area near what their computers identified as the Korean Peninsula. The local conflict seemed intense but manageable. Two human factions were fighting using crude weapons and basic vehicles, nothing that sophisticated galactic peacekeepers couldn't handle. Vextai led his team out of the ship. The Earth air felt strange in their breathing units. Too much oxygen, too much moisture. The gravity was lighter than their homeworlds, making each step feel bouncy and uncertain. Remember, Vextai told his team, humans are primitive but intelligent. They've developed agriculture and basic industry. Treat them with respect but maintain authority. We're here to help them see reason. The first humans they encountered were not what Vextai expected. A group of soldiers emerged from the forest. They wore simple green uniforms and carried basic projectile weapons. Their leader was a young woman who looked barely old enough to fight. She had short black hair and determined eyes. Behind her walked a younger man who shared her facial features. The woman raised her hand in what appeared to be a peaceful gesture. She spoke in the local language, but Vextai's translator quickly decoded her words. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "My name is Minji. This is my brother Hansu. We represent the Korean resistance forces." Vextai stepped forward. His massive form towered over the small humans. "I am Commander Vextai of the Galactic Defense Corps. We have come to help end the fighting on your world." Minji studied him carefully. Her eyes showed no fear, which surprised Vextai. Most primitive species were terrified when first meeting galactic races. "That's very kind," she replied. "But right now we have bigger problems. Japanese forces are attacking our village. 300 civilians are trapped there. We need to evacuate them before the artillery bombardment begins." Artillery bombardment. Vextai had read about human weapons in the briefing files. Primitive explosive devices that could damage small areas. Nothing his team couldn't handle. "We can assist with evacuation," he offered. "Our ship has medical facilities and can transport civilians to safety." Minji shook her head. "No time, the attack starts in 2 hours. We need to get those people out now." "Will you help us fight?" Vextai was confused. Fight? His mission was to stop fighting, not participate in it. "We are peacekeepers," he explained. "We don't take sides in local conflicts." "Then watch from a distance," Hansu spoke for the first time. "But stay ready. You might learn something about humans today." Before Vextai could respond, explosions echoed through the forest. The sound was much louder than he expected from primitive weapons. The ground shook under his feet. "They're early," Minji said calmly. She turned to her soldiers. "Execute Plan 7. Hansu, take the eastern approach. I'll handle the northern ridge." The human soldiers scattered into the forest with practiced efficiency. Vextai was impressed by their organization. These primitives seemed well trained for their technology level. "Sir," Korvash said privately, "should we follow them?" "Yes," Vextai decided. "We need to understand this conflict before we can mediate it." The aliens followed Minji's group through the forest. The humans moved quickly and quietly despite carrying heavy equipment. They knew every tree, every path, every hiding spot. This was clearly their home territory. As they approached the village, Vextai saw the enemy forces for the first time. Japanese soldiers in different uniforms were advancing with vehicles and weapons. Their numbers were overwhelming compared to the small resistance group. "How do they plan to fight against such odds?" Yolandra whispered. They got their answer quickly. Minji positioned her soldiers on a ridge overlooking the village. She studied the enemy advance through primitive optical devices. Then she turned to Hansu and spoke in rapid Korean. Her brother nodded and disappeared into the trees. "What's she planning?" Vextai wondered aloud. The answer came in the form of a massive explosion. The mountainside above the advancing enemy suddenly collapsed. Tons of rock and earth thundered down the slope, blocking the main approach route and crushing several enemy vehicles. Vextai stared in shock. "How did they do that?" Through his binoculars, he saw Hansu emerging from a hidden position near the rock slide. The young human had somehow caused the entire mountainside to collapse using only primitive explosives. But the Japanese forces were not finished. They regrouped and began advancing through alternate routes. Their superior numbers and equipment still gave them a major advantage. Minji seemed unconcerned. She gave more orders to her soldiers. Small groups broke off and disappeared into different positions around the village. Over the next hour, Vextai watched something he had never seen before. The humans fought with a combination of intelligence, creativity, and complete disregard for their own safety that defied everything he knew about warfare. They used the forest itself as a weapon. Hidden traps disabled enemy vehicles. Carefully placed obstacles channeled the attack into killing zones. Every tree, every rock, every stream became part of their defense plan, but most disturbing was their willingness to sacrifice themselves. When one position became overrun, the defending soldiers didn't retreat. They fought until they died, buying time for civilians to escape. Vextai watched a young human soldier, barely more than a child, hold a bridge against 20 enemy soldiers. The boy knew he couldn't win. He knew he would die, but he fought anyway because his death would delay the enemy for precious minutes. "This is madness," Corvash muttered. "Why don't they withdraw when defeat is certain?" "Because they're not fighting to win this battle," Ylandra realized. "They're fighting to save those civilians. Each death serves their larger purpose." As the battle continued, Vextai saw more examples of human tactical thinking. They turned their primitive technology into advantages. They used their knowledge of local terrain to multiply their effectiveness. They coordinated complex plans using simple communication methods. Most importantly, they never gave up. Even when situations seemed hopeless, they found new ways to continue fighting. When the dust settled, the impossible had happened. The small resistance force had not only evacuated all the civilians, but had also forced the superior enemy army to retreat. They had won through pure determination and creative tactics. Minji found Vextai after the battle. Her uniform was torn and dirty. She had a cut on her forehead and walked with a slight limp, but her eyes still burned with the same determined fire. "Thank you for staying to watch," she said. "Most observers run when the shooting starts." "How?" Vextai asked simply. "How did you defeat such a larger force?" Minji smiled. It was not a happy expression. "Because we had something they didn't," she replied. "We had a reason to fight that was stronger than our fear of dying." As Vextai returned to his ship that night, he realized that everything in the mission briefing had been wrong. Humans weren't primitive, they weren't harmless, and they definitely weren't ready for galactic peacekeeping. They were something else entirely, something he was only beginning to understand, something that terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced. After the battle, Vextai knew he needed to understand more about these humans. His peacekeeping mission had become something much bigger. He needed to study this species before making any decisions about galactic contact. He established a temporary base near the human settlement. His team began running detailed scans of the planet Earth, while making careful contact with local humans. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. The first human to approach their base was a scientist named Jinho. He was a thin man with thick glasses, who spoke several languages. Unlike the soldiers, he seemed fascinated by the aliens rather than focused on the war. "Welcome to our world," Jinho said in careful English. "I study biology and geology. I would love to learn about your home planets." Vextai was happy to find a human interested in peaceful exchange. "We come from many worlds," he explained. "Worlds with stable climates and gentle conditions. Perfect for supporting life." Jinho nodded thoughtfully. "How interesting. Earth is quite different." "Different how?" Vextai asked. What Jinho told him next changed everything Vextai thought he understood about planetary biology. "Earth is what we call a dynamic planet," Jinho explained. "The ground moves constantly. The continents drift across the surface over millions of years. Mountains rise and fall. Volcanoes explode regularly, covering huge areas with molten rock and ash." Vextai's scanning equipment confirmed these statements. Earth's geological activity was off the charts compared to most inhabited worlds. "Our weather systems are also quite violent," Jinho continued. "We have storms that span entire continents, winds that can destroy cities, rain that falls so hard it causes massive floods, snow that can bury entire regions." The alien commander checked his atmospheric readings. The energy levels in Earth's weather patterns were enormous. Most galactic species would consider such conditions completely uninhabitable. "And our gravity," Jinho added casually, "is quite strong compared to most worlds that support life." Vextai felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Earth's gravity was indeed crushing by galactic standards. His team needed mechanical assistance just to walk normally. But humans moved as if it was nothing. "How do you survive in such conditions?" Vextai asked. Jinho smiled. "We adapt. Humans are very good at adapting. Over the following days, Vextai learned just how good humans were at adaptation. Jinho introduced him to other humans who demonstrated abilities that should have been impossible. He met a farmer named Taemin, who grew food in soil that would poison most galactic species. The earth dirt contained levels of heavy metals and toxic compounds that should have killed any plants. But human agriculture had learned to work with these conditions. "We breed plants that can handle the toxins," Taemin explained. "We add materials to the soil to balance the chemistry. We've been doing this for thousands of years." Vextai's team analyzed human food crops. The plants had evolved complex chemical defenses against Earth's hostile environment. They were essentially living chemical factories, producing compounds that would be considered advanced medicines on other worlds. "And humans eat these plants safely?" Yolandra asked in amazement. "Not just safely," Jinho replied. "These compounds make us stronger and healthier. Our bodies have learned to use Earth's natural toxins as beneficial nutrients." The revelation got worse when they met a human child. Her name was Sora, and she was only 8 years old. She had been playing in the forest when she encountered Vextai's team. Unlike adult humans, she showed no fear of the massive aliens. Instead, she was curious and friendly. "Are you from the stars?" she asked excitedly. "My teacher says there might be people living on other worlds." Vextai found her enthusiasm charming. But what happened next nearly stopped his heart. While talking to the aliens, Sora stepped on something hidden in the grass. A loud hissing sound filled the air. A snake as thick as Vextai's arm struck at the little girl's leg. Its fangs sank deep into her flesh before she could react. Yolandra immediately scanned the creature. "Commander, that snake's venom could kill most galactic species in minutes. We need to get the child to our medical bay immediately." But Sora just looked down at the bite marks and sighed. "Oh no, a snake bite. Mom is going to be so angry." She seemed annoyed rather than afraid. "Child," Vextai said urgently, "you've been poisoned. You need medical treatment right away." Sora shook her head. "It's okay. Snake bites hurt, but they're not too dangerous if you stay calm. My uncle got bit by one last year and he was fine." She sat down on a fallen log and pressed her hands against the bite wounds. "I just need to slow the poison down until we can get back to the village. The doctor there has medicine for snake bites." Vextai stared in horror as the child calmly applied first aid to herself. His medical scanner showed massive amounts of deadly toxin entering her bloodstream. Any galactic species would already be dead or dying. But Sora's vital signs remained stable. Her body was fighting the poison in real time. "How is this possible?" Corvash whispered. They accompanied Sora back to her village, expecting to carry her unconscious body within minutes. Instead, she walked the entire 6-hour journey. She talked cheerfully with the aliens the whole time, asking questions about space travel and other planets. By the time they reached the village doctor, her body had neutralized most of the snake venom on its own. The medical treatment was just a precaution. "Does this happen often?" Vextai asked the doctor, an elderly woman named Hyaron. "Snake bites? Oh yes, quite common in rural areas, especially with children who like to explore the forest." She gave Sora a stern look. "Though I wish they would be more careful." "And children survive these poisonings regularly?" "Most of the time, yes. Human children are quite resilient, much tougher than they look." Vextai's scanner had recorded everything. When he analyzed the data later, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. Sora's immune system had identified the snake toxin as a threat and immediately began producing antibodies to neutralize it. Her liver and kidneys had started filtering the poison from her bloodstream. Her nervous system had adapted to maintain normal function, despite the chemical attack. All of this happened automatically, without conscious thought or external help. "Jinho," Vextai said when they returned to the base, "I need to understand something. How long have humans lived on this planet?" "Our species evolved here over millions of years," the scientist replied. "We've always called Earth home. And in that time, your people have survived all these dangers? The toxic environment, the violent weather, the poisonous creatures, the unstable geology." "Not just survived," Jinho corrected. "We've thrived. Each generation becomes better adapted to our world's challenges. What would kill our ancestors now makes us stronger." Vextai felt pieces of a terrifying puzzle falling into place. "You're saying that every human alive today is descended from millions of generations of survivors?" "Exactly. Every human carries genetic memories of every threat our species has ever faced. Our bodies know how to handle dangers that other species have never even encountered. That night, Vextai sat in his command chair reviewing the day's discoveries. His team's scans had revealed the full scope of Earth's hostility to life. The planet was a nightmare world of constant threats and deadly challenges. Any normal species would have died out or fled such a world long ago. But humans hadn't just survived. They had turned their death world into an advantage. Every threat had made them stronger. Every challenge had taught them new skills. Every danger had been converted into another tool for survival. "Sir," Yolandra said quietly, "I've finished analyzing the planetary data. What did you find?" Earth scores maximum danger ratings in 17 different categories: geological instability, atmospheric toxicity, gravitational stress, biological hazards, weather extremes. By galactic standards, this planet should be completely uninhabitable. Vextai nodded grimly. And yet humans not only live here, they consider it a paradise. There's more, sir. I've been studying their biological data. Human genetic diversity is incredible. They carry adaptation markers for thousands of different environmental threats. Their immune systems are more complex than anything in our databases. What does that mean? It means that humans aren't just adapted to Earth, sir. They're adapted to survive anywhere. Any planet, any environment, any set of challenges. Their bodies can handle conditions that would kill us. Vextai stared out at the human village in the distance. Lights were coming on in windows as families gathered for their evening meals. Children played in the streets. Everything looked peaceful and normal. But now he knew the truth. Every one of those humans was a walking biological weapon system. Each person carried within them the genetic legacy of 10,000 generations of survivors who had looked at a world trying to kill them and decided to make it home instead. "Yolandra," he said finally, "I want you to run projections on human expansion potential." "Sir, if humans ever develop space travel, how quickly could they spread across the galaxy?" His science officer's face went pale as she considered the implications. Given their adaptation capabilities and reproductive rates, they could colonize any planet, sir, any environment we've discovered. They wouldn't need terraforming or environmental suits. They would just adapt. Vextai closed his eyes. For the first time in his long military career, Vextai thought he understood human warfare after watching the Korean resistance fighters. He was wrong. What he had seen was just a small example of something much larger and more terrifying. His education in true human warfare began when his team was invited to observe a major battle in the Pacific Ocean. The humans called it Operation Olympic, the planned invasion of Japan itself. Commander Kyung of the Korean forces had arranged for the aliens to witness what he called the largest human military operation in history. Vextai accepted, thinking it would help him understand human tactical capabilities. He was not prepared for what he saw. The invasion force was massive beyond anything in galactic military doctrine. Thousands of ships covered the ocean from horizon to horizon. Hundreds of thousands of human soldiers prepared to assault heavily defended beaches. The scale of the operation defied logic. "Why so many?" Vextai asked Kyung as they stood on the command ship's bridge. "Because the Japanese will fight for every inch of their homeland," Kyung replied. "They will never surrender willingly, so we must be prepared to take their entire country by force." Vextai studied the tactical displays. The Japanese defenders had turned their islands into fortress worlds. Every beach was covered with weapons. Every hill had been made into a strongpoint. Every city was prepared for siege warfare. Surely negotiation would be more efficient than this massive assault, Vextai suggested. Kyung and the other human officers exchanged glances. An American general named MacArthur spoke up. "Commander, you don't understand human nature yet. Some things cannot be negotiated. Some wars must be fought to the end regardless of cost." "But the casualties," Vextai protested. "Our computers predict hundreds of thousands of deaths on both sides." "Yes," MacArthur agreed calmly. "We know, we've planned for it. Vextai felt his alien blood run cold. These humans were not just accepting massive casualties as a possibility. They were planning for them as a certainty. And they were proceeding anyway. The first wave of landing craft approached the beaches as Vextai watched from the command ship. Japanese artillery began firing immediately. Explosions sent water and metal flying everywhere. Ships burned and sank. Humans died in numbers that would constitute genocide for smaller species, but more ships kept coming. Why don't they retreat when the losses become too heavy? Korvash asked in horror. A human communications officer named Nari answered without looking up from her radio equipment. Because retreating won't accomplish the mission. We came here to take this island. So we take it. Vextai watched wave after wave of landing craft hit the beaches. Each wave lost ships and men. Each wave pushed a little further inland. The humans absorbed casualties that would have broken most galactic armies and kept fighting. On the beaches, he saw individual acts of courage that defied explanation. Soldiers threw themselves on enemy explosives to save their comrades. Medics ran into heavy fire to rescue wounded men. Officers led charges against impossible odds because their orders said to advance. "This is madness," Yolandra whispered. But it was effective madness. By the end of the first day, human forces had established footholds on 3 different beaches. The cost had been enormous, but they had gained their objectives. That night, Vextai spoke with some of the wounded soldiers who had been brought back to the hospital ships. He wanted to understand their thinking. A young Marine named Day had been shot 3 times while taking a Japanese bunker. His wounds were serious but not fatal. "Why did you continue attacking after you were hit?" Vextai asked. Day looked confused by the question. "My squad was counting on me. We had a job to do. But you could have died." "Yeah, probably, but that bunker was blocking our advance. Someone had to take it out." "And you volunteered for this mission?" "Hell yes," Day grinned despite his pain. "This is the big one. The fight that ends the war. Wouldn't miss it for anything." Vextai spoke to dozens of wounded soldiers. All gave similar answers. They had volunteered for an operation they knew would cost them heavily. They had charged into certain death because their mission required it. Most disturbing of all, they seemed proud to have participated. Over the following weeks, Vextai observed the entire Pacific campaign. Island after island fell to human assault forces. Each battle followed the same pattern. Overwhelming Japanese defenses. Massive human casualties. Relentless human advance regardless of losses. The humans had turned warfare into a mathematical equation. They calculated acceptable loss rates. They determined the minimum force needed to achieve objectives. They planned logistics for replacing casualties as quickly as they occurred, and they executed these plans with mechanical precision. On Okinawa, Vextai watched human soldiers fight for 82 days over a piece of rock that had no strategic resources. The island was simply a stepping stone to the next objective. But both sides treated it as if the fate of the universe depended on controlling that particular chunk of coral and dirt. "I don't understand the strategic value," Vextai told a human colonel named Park who was coordinating artillery strikes. "There isn't any strategic value," Park replied while marking targets on his map. "The island itself means nothing. Then why are you fighting so hard for it?" Park looked up from his map. "Because they're defending it. And because we said we'd take it, that was it. No complex strategic reasoning. No resource calculations. No territorial advantages. Humans would fight massive battles and accept enormous casualties, simply because they had decided to take something and the enemy had decided to defend it. But the most disturbing revelation came when Vextai learned about human total war doctrine. He was reviewing casualty reports with a logistics officer named Minho when he noticed something strange in the data. "These numbers include civilian casualties," Vextai observed. "Of course they do," Minho replied. "Total war means exactly that, total." "I don't understand." Minho pulled up historical data on his primitive computer. "Look at these numbers from our bombing campaigns. We've destroyed entire cities, killed millions of civilians, burned their industrial capacity to ash." Vextai stared at the figures in horror. "You target non-combatants deliberately?" "We target everything that supports their war effort. Factories, shipyards, railways, refineries. If civilians happen to live near those targets," Minho shrugged. "War is war." The alien commander had seen many conflicts across the galaxy, but galactic warfare followed strict rules about protecting civilian populations. Military forces fought military forces. Infrastructure was captured, not destroyed. The goal was always to minimize damage to society. Human warfare was different. When humans went to war, they went completely. Every resource, every person, every building became part of the conflict. They would burn entire civilizations to ash if that's what victory required. But the reconstruction costs, Vextai protested. The time needed to rebuild. Surely targeted military action would be more efficient. Efficient isn't the point, Minho explained. Winning is the point. When we go to war, we go to win. Everything else is secondary. Vextai realized he was looking at something unprecedented in galactic history. Most species fought wars for specific limited objectives: territory, resources, trade advantages. When those objectives became too expensive to achieve, they negotiated settlements. Humans fought wars for abstractions. Honor, duty, ideology, revenge, things that couldn't be measured or negotiated, and they would pay any price to achieve victory in pursuit of these invisible goals. The final piece of the puzzle came when he witnessed a human kamikaze attack. Japanese pilots, knowing their cause was hopeless, loaded their aircraft with explosives and flew them directly into American ships. They died instantly, but each attack damaged or destroyed valuable enemy vessels. Vextai watched in stunned silence as dozens of human pilots committed suicide attacks throughout the day. Each pilot could have ejected safely. Each chose to die instead. Why? He asked Admiral Nimitz, the American fleet commander. Because they believe their deaths will serve their emperor and their people, Nimitz replied. They've been taught that dying for their cause is the highest honor. And your pilots? Would they do the same? Nimitz considered the question carefully. If the situation was desperate enough and the cause was important enough, yes, Americans would do the same thing. That night, Vextai sat in his quarters reviewing everything he had learned about human warfare. The conclusions were terrifying. Humans didn't just fight wars, they fought crusades. When they committed to a conflict, they committed completely. They would sacrifice entire generations to achieve victory. They would destroy civilizations rather than accept defeat. They would die gladly if their death served their cause. Most disturbing of all, they were very good at it. Human military doctrine was sophisticated, flexible, and brutally effective. They learned from each battle and adapted their tactics constantly. They improved their weapons and strategies at an incredible pace, and they never ever gave up. Sir, Yolandra said softly, I've been analyzing human military history. What did you find? They've been fighting major wars continuously for their entire recorded history. Thousands of years of constant warfare. Each generation learns from the previous one's battles. Vextai nodded grimly, making them better warriors with each passing year. There's more, sir. I've studied their weapons development. As the war on Earth began to wind down, Vextai thought he understood humans. They were survivors from a death world who had become extremely efficient warriors. Dangerous, yes, but comprehensible within galactic standards. Then he began studying human society itself, and realized he had been completely wrong about everything. The revelation started when he met Dr. Hyun, a human anthropologist who had been documenting wartime social changes. She was a small, elderly woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes. Unlike the soldiers, she seemed more interested in understanding alien culture than in fighting wars. I study how societies develop and change over time, she explained when Vextai asked about her work. War is just one aspect of human civilization. To understand us, you need to see the bigger picture. Vextai was eager to learn. Please tell me about human civilization. How did your people develop culture and government? Dr. Hyun smiled. That's a complex question, but I think the key is understanding that everything humans do is based on competition. Competition? Yes, humans compete for everything. Food, territory, mates, resources, status, ideas, even entertainment. Competition drives all human development. Vextai was confused. But competition leads to conflict. How does that create stable civilization? That's the brilliant part, Dr. Hyun replied. We learn to channel competition into productive forms. Instead of fighting over resources, we compete to create better resources. Instead of warring over territory, we compete to build better communities. She led him to a human library, one of the few buildings that had survived the bombing intact. Inside, thousands of books lined the shelves from floor to ceiling. These books represent thousands of years of human thought, Dr. Hyun explained. Philosophy, science, literature, history, all of it created through intellectual competition. Vextai examined some of the volumes. The subjects ranged from poetry to mathematics to military strategy. You mean humans compete with ideas? Constantly. Every scientist tries to make discoveries that surpass previous work. Every artist tries to create something more beautiful than what came before. Every philosopher tries to understand truth better than their predecessors. This was completely alien to galactic thinking. Most species developed knowledge through cooperation and consensus building. The idea of competitive intellectual development was unprecedented. But surely this causes social instability, Vextai protested. Dr. Hyun laughed. Oh, it causes enormous instability. Human societies are constantly changing, evolving, improving. What we call progress. She showed him human historical records. In just the past 200 years, humans had transformed their entire civilization multiple times. Agricultural societies had become industrial. Monarchies had become democracies. Local communities had become global networks. We never stop changing because we never stop competing, Dr. Hyun explained. Each generation tries to build something better than what their parents created. Vextai spent weeks studying human social development with Dr. Hyun and her colleague, a sociologist named Yuna. What he learned challenged every assumption about how intelligent societies should function. Human economic systems were based on controlled competition. Instead of central planning like most galactic civilizations used, humans allowed millions of individuals and groups to compete for resources and customers. The competition drove constant innovation and improvement. But this must create massive inequality and social conflict, Yolandra observed when Vextai shared his findings. It does, Yuna agreed. But it also creates enormous productivity and rapid development. Human technology advances faster than any stable system could achieve. Their political systems were equally competitive. Instead of consensus rule, humans had multiple groups competing for political power. Citizens chose between different competing visions of government through regular contests called elections. This seems incredibly inefficient, Korvash commented. Why not simply choose the best leaders and let them govern? Because we can't agree on who the best leaders are, Dr. Hyun replied. So we compete to determine leadership and change leaders regularly to prevent stagnation. Even human entertainment was competitive. They created elaborate games where individuals and teams competed for symbolic victories. Millions of humans would gather to watch these competitions, cheering for their chosen sides with the same intensity they showed in actual warfare. Sports teach us competition skills in a safe environment, Yuna explained as they watched a baseball game. We practice winning and losing without actual life or death consequences. But the most disturbing discovery came when Vextai learned about human exploration. He was reviewing historical records when he found references to human expeditions into dangerous and unknown territories. Arctic exploration, deep ocean diving, mountain climbing, cave exploration, desert crossings. Why do humans deliberately seek out dangerous places? He asked Dr. Hyun. Because they're there, she replied simply. Humans have an instinctive drive to explore. We want to see what's beyond the next hill, across the next ocean, above the next mountain. Vextai studied the exploration records more carefully. Humans had been systematically mapping and exploring their entire planet for thousands of years. They had sent expeditions to both polar regions. They had climbed the highest mountains. They had dove to the deepest ocean trenches. All of this exploration had been done with primitive technology and enormous risk. Hundreds of explorers had died in the attempt. But the deaths only seemed to encourage more exploration. Most species explore when they need new resources or territory, Vextai observed. Humans seem to explore for its own sake. Exactly, Dr. Hyun confirmed. We explore because we're curious. We want to know what's out there. Then she showed him something that made his blood freeze. Human space programs. We've been dreaming about visiting other worlds for centuries, she explained, showing him science fiction literature dating back hundreds of years. Now we're finally beginning to make those dreams reality. Vextai studied the early human rocket experiments. Primitive devices that barely reached the edge of their atmosphere. Most exploded on launch. Many killed their pilots. But humans kept improving the designs and attempting longer flights. These early rockets are incredibly dangerous, he observed. The failure rate is enormous. Yes, but each failure teaches us something new, Dr. Hyun replied. Eventually we'll solve all the problems and reach the stars. Reach the stars. The casual confidence in her voice terrified Vextai more than any weapon he had encountered. He met with human space program engineers, including a brilliant rocket designer named Shung and a program director named Inha. They spoke about space travel as if it was inevitable rather than a distant possibility. The basic physics are well understood, Seung explained. It's just an engineering problem now. Build bigger rockets, solve the technical challenges, train the pilots. But the risks, Vextai protested. Space travel is incredibly dangerous even with advanced galactic technology. Of course it's dangerous, Inha agreed cheerfully. That's what makes it interesting. Besides, dangerous just means we need to be more careful, not that we should give up. They showed him detailed plans for missions to their moon, to nearby planets, eventually to other star systems. The timeline was aggressive beyond belief. They expected to reach their moon within decades, not centuries. How can you be so confident? Vextai asked. Because we've solved harder problems before, Seung replied. 100 years ago, humans couldn't fly at all. 50 years ago, we couldn't cross oceans by air. Today we have aircraft that can circle the globe. Tomorrow we'll have spacecraft that can reach the stars. The mathematics supported their confidence. Human technological development was accelerating exponentially. Each generation built on the discoveries of the previous one, but at an ever-increasing pace. They went from horse-drawn carts to powered flight in less than 50 years, Yolandra reported, after analyzing the data. From the first airplane to jet aircraft in another 50 years. At this rate, they'll have interstellar capability within centuries, not millennia, Vextai finished. But the most terrifying aspect wasn't their technological development. It was their motivation. Unlike galactic species, who explored space for practical reasons like resource acquisition or territorial expansion, humans wanted to explore space for the same reason they climbed mountains and crossed oceans. Because it was there. We're not looking for anything specific out there, Inha explained when Vextai asked about human space program goals. We just want to see what's there. Meet whoever might be living among the stars, learn about other worlds. Meet whoever might be living among the stars. Vextai realized he was looking at something completely unprecedented in galactic history. Most species develop space travel slowly, cautiously for specific practical purposes. They joined galactic civilization when they were invited and ready. Humans were going to burst into the galaxy uninvited, unprepared and driven by nothing more than curiosity and competitive instinct. They wouldn't wait for contact. They wouldn't follow established protocols. They wouldn't respect boundaries or territories or established order. They would simply go wherever they wanted to go, do whatever they wanted to do, and compete with whatever they found there. Sir, Korvash said quietly after reviewing Vextai's reports. Back in the council chambers, Vextai reached the final part of his presentation. The assembled representatives had listened in growing silence as he described his discoveries about humanity. Now came the hardest part, explaining what it all meant for the galaxy. Council members, Vextai continued, everything I have told you leads to one inescapable conclusion. Humanity represents the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced. The council erupted in nervous chatter. Several representatives protested loudly. Surely you exaggerate, Commander, said Zephyra of the Storm Riders. They are a single species on one small planet. How dangerous can they be? Vextai activated his holographic display one final time. It showed a map of the galaxy with human expansion projections. They are dangerous because they do not think like us, they do not act like us, and they do not want the same things we want. He highlighted Earth's position on the galactic map. Currently, humans are confined to one world. But my analysis shows this will not last long. They will develop interstellar travel within the next few centuries. When they do, they will expand rapidly across the galaxy. Even if they develop space travel, argued Korthak of the Rock People, galactic space is vast. There is room for everyone. You still do not understand, Vextai replied. Humans will not simply find empty space and settle there quietly. They will actively seek out other species to meet, study, compete with, and potentially conquer. He changed the display to show human historical expansion patterns. On their own world, humans have never encountered a territory they did not eventually explore and claim. They have spread to every continent, every climate, every environment their planet offers. The display showed arrows radiating out from human population centers, gradually covering the entire Earth. They do this not because they need the territory, but because it exists. They explore for the sake of exploration. They expand for the sake of expansion. They compete for the sake of competition. Melodia of the Song People spoke up. But surely they can be reasoned with, taught to respect boundaries and follow galactic law. Vextai's expression grew darker. Council member, humans do not recognize boundaries unless those boundaries are enforced by superior force, and they consider any law to be a challenge to be overcome, rather than a rule to be followed. He showed examples from human history. They have spent thousands of years creating laws, then finding ways around those laws. Every restriction becomes a puzzle to solve. Every limitation becomes a barrier to break. The chamber fell silent as the implication sank in. Furthermore, Vextai continued, humans have a concept they call manifest destiny. They believe they have a natural right to expand and explore wherever they choose. They consider this expansion to be morally good, even when it displaces other populations. He showed historical examples of human expansion on Earth, the colonization of new continents, the displacement of native populations, the transformation of entire ecosystems to suit human needs. When humans expand, they do not adapt to existing conditions. They change conditions to suit themselves. They terraform environments, displace existing populations, and remake entire worlds according to their preferences. The council members exchanged worried glances. This was not how galactic civilization worked. Most species adapted to new environments rather than changing them. But the most dangerous aspect of humanity, Vextai said, is not their expansion or their competitiveness. It is their refusal to accept defeat. He displayed human military statistics. In my study of human warfare, I discovered something unprecedented. Humans have never permanently accepted conquest by another force. Every time they have been defeated, they have eventually fought back and regained their independence. The data was overwhelming. Throughout human history, no empire had successfully held human populations indefinitely. Every occupation had eventually failed, no matter how overwhelming the conquering force had seemed. They do not surrender, Vextai explained. They retreat, regroup, adapt, and attack again. They will fight for generations if necessary. They will sacrifice millions of lives. They will destroy their own cities rather than let enemies hold them. Yolandra stepped forward to present her analysis. Council members, I have run computer simulations of human galactic expansion scenarios. The results are disturbing. The holographic display changed to show mathematical projections. In the best-case scenario, assuming humans follow all galactic laws and protocols, they will still expand to control 30% of habitable worlds within 1,000 years. Gasps echoed through the chamber. In the worst-case scenario, assuming humans compete aggressively for resources and territory, they will dominate the entire galaxy within 500 years. The council erupted in shouting. Representatives demanded to know how one primitive species could possibly threaten advanced galactic civilization. Vextai raised his hand for silence. The answer is simple. Humans are not bound by the limitations that constrain the rest of us. He began listing human advantages. They reproduce faster than most galactic species. They adapt to new environments more quickly. They develop technology at an unprecedented rate. They accept casualties and risks that would break other civilizations. Most importantly, he continued, they do not respect the established order. While we debate and negotiate and follow protocols, humans act. While we seek consensus, humans compete. While we avoid risks, humans embrace them. Korvash presented the military analysis. Council members, I have studied human combat effectiveness against galactic standard forces. The results are sobering. The display showed tactical simulations. Human ground forces would be extremely difficult to defeat due to their terrain adaptation skills and willingness to accept heavy casualties. Human naval forces would be dangerous due to their innovative tactics and aggressive command philosophy. But most concerning is their potential space warfare capability. Humans think of space combat differently than we do. They would use kamikaze attacks, environmental weapons, and asymmetric tactics that violate all galactic military conventions. They would turn war into something we do not know how to fight, Korvash concluded. Vextai resumed his presentation. Council members, I want to be clear about what I am not saying. I am not saying humans are evil. They are not motivated by hatred or malice. In many ways, they are admirable. They are brave, resourceful, loyal to their communities, and capable of great compassion. But they are fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization as we understand it. They will not follow our rules because they do not believe in rules. They will not respect our boundaries because they do not believe in boundaries. They will not accept limitations because they do not believe anything is impossible. The chamber was completely silent now. Every representative understood the implications. So what do you recommend, Commander? Asked Zephyr quietly. Vextai had dreaded this question. We have 3 options, none of them good. He outlined the possibilities. First, we can attempt to destroy humanity before they develop space travel. This would require massive military action against a planet full of the most effective warriors in galactic history. The casualties would be enormous and success would not be guaranteed. Several council members recoiled at the suggestion of genocide. Second, we can attempt to isolate Earth and prevent human space development. This would require permanent military blockade of their system. It would only delay the problem, and humans would eventually find ways around our barriers. Third, we can attempt to integrate humanity into galactic civilization through careful contact and education. This offers the best hope for peaceful coexistence, but it also risks accelerating human development and galactic expansion. The council began heated debate. Some argued for immediate military action. Others insisted on diplomatic contact. A few suggested complete avoidance of the human system. But Vextai raised his hand again and his voice cut through the arguments. Council members, while we debate, humans are building rockets. While we plan, humans are developing weapons. While we hesitate, humans are asking themselves the most dangerous question in the universe. He paused for effect. What else is out there? The chamber fell silent. They will find us, Vextai continued. Not because we reveal ourselves, but because finding things is what humans do. They will detect our communications. They will trace our ship movements. They will follow our energy signatures back to their sources. And when they find us, they will want to meet us. They will want to compete with us. They will want to challenge us, trade with us, learn from us, and ultimately replace us. Because that is what humans do. They never stop exploring, never stop expanding, never stop competing, and they absolutely never give up. Vextai moved to the center of the chamber for his final words. I have fought across this galaxy for 30 years. I have faced every type of enemy and every kind of threat, but I have never encountered anything as dangerous as a species that looks at the impossible and sees an interesting challenge. Humans do not fear the unknown. They are excited by it. They do not avoid danger. They are attracted to it. They do not respect authority. They question it. Most terrifying of all, they have each other. Human pack bonding creates loyalty that transcends individual survival instinct. They will sacrifice themselves for their families, their communities. 5 years after Vextai's presentation to the council, the galaxy learned that his warnings had been both accurate and insufficient. The first sign came from the monitoring stations at the edge of human space. Energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic database. Primitive but effective fusion drives pushing. Crude metal ships at incredible speeds toward nearby star systems. Humanity had reached the stars ahead of all projections. Vextai stood on the observation deck of the galactic monitoring station Kepler 7, watching the human fleet approach through the viewing screen. His hands no longer trembled when he thought about humans. Now he felt something much worse than fear. He felt inevitability. Commander, his aide Torvash reported, the human ships will reach the Proxima system within 6 standard months. They appear to be heading directly for the inhabited worlds there. Vextai nodded grimly. Any response from the Proxima colonies? The gentle ones have requested immediate evacuation assistance. They say they cannot defend against human contact. Of course they couldn't. The gentle ones were a peaceful species of philosophers and artists. They had never experienced warfare or aggressive contact with other species. The idea of competing with humans would be completely alien to them. And the council's response? Still debating, Torvash replied with frustration. Some members want to establish formal first contact protocols. Others are demanding military intervention. A few are suggesting we simply abandon the Proxima system entirely. Vextai almost smiled. The council was still trying to handle humanity through traditional galactic methods. Debate, consensus, careful planning. They didn't understand that humans would make contact on their own terms regardless of what the galaxy decided. Sir, Torvash continued, there's more. We've detected at least 12 other human expeditions heading toward different star systems. They're not following any central plan. Each group seems to be exploring independently. That was very human. Instead of one carefully planned expansion program, they were launching dozens of separate missions in all directions. Some would fail, but others would succeed, and each successful mission would encourage more exploration. Any attempts at communication? Yes, sir. 3 different species have tried to establish contact. The results were interesting. Torvash showed Vextai the communication logs. The tree people of Gliesa 581 had sent a formal diplomatic greeting following standard galactic protocols. The humans had responded with enthusiasm, but their reply completely ignored diplomatic hierarchy and protocol structure. Instead of addressing the tree people's government, the humans had tried to establish personal relationships with individual tree people. They had asked questions about families, hobbies, favorite foods, and personal interests. They had shared pictures of their own families and stories about their home world. The tree people, who conducted all business through formal government channels, had no idea how to respond to such casual, personal communication. They're treating first contact like making new friends, Torvash observed. Because that's exactly what they're doing, Vextai replied. Humans don't see other species as political entities. They see them as potential friends, competitors, trading partners, or interesting subjects to study. The second contact attempt had been even more confusing. The logic masters of Kepler 442 had tried to establish communication through mathematical formulas and logical propositions. This should have been the perfect way to communicate with any intelligent species. But humans had responded to the mathematical messages with mathematical jokes, puzzles, and riddles. They had turned a formal logical exchange into some kind of intellectual game. The logic masters, who had never encountered the concept of humor, had spent weeks trying to decode the logical meaning of human jokes. They were still working on it. And the third contact? Vextai asked. The warriors of Vega attempted to establish dominance through displays of military strength. They sent images of their weapons and battle fleets, expecting humans to either submit or respond with their own military demonstrations. Vextai could guess how humans had responded to that approach. The humans sent back detailed technical questions about vegan military equipment, Torvash continued. They wanted to know how the weapons worked, what materials they were made from, and whether they could examine some samples. They were studying vegan military technology? Worse than that, sir. They were treating it like a friendly exchange of engineering information. They offered to share their own weapons designs in return. Vextai shook his head. The warriors of Vega had tried to intimidate humans with superior firepower. Instead, humans had seen it as an opportunity to learn about new weapons and improve their own military capabilities. The Vegans don't know what to do with them, Torvash added. They can't fight humans because humans keep trying to learn from them. They can't intimidate humans because humans are genuinely interested in vegan culture and technology. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. The message came from Admiral Chen of the human exploration fleet currently approaching Proxima. Attention, galactic neighbors, the human voice said cheerfully. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Stellar Navy. We're approaching your system for peaceful exploration and first contact. We're very excited to meet you and learn about your civilization. The message continued with typical human enthusiasm. We've brought gifts from Earth including art, music, literature, and food samples. We'd love to establish trade relationships and cultural exchanges. We're also very interested in your scientific discoveries and technological developments. We understand this might be your first contact with humans, Admiral Chen added. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. We're friendly people and we're here to make friends. Vextai winced. The humans were approaching galactic civilization like tourists visiting a new country. They had no concept of the complex political and social structures they were disrupting. Sir, Torvash said quietly, what should we tell them? Before Vextai could respond, another alert chimed. This message came from Dr. Sarah Kim, the human mission's lead scientist. Galactic scientific community, her voice began. This is Dr. Kim with the human expedition. We've detected some fascinating energy signatures in this region that don't match anything in our physics models. We'd love to collaborate with local scientists to study these phenomena. We're particularly interested in faster-than-light communication methods and advanced propulsion systems. In exchange, we can share our research on atomic physics, genetics, and planetary engineering. We're also carrying complete databases of human scientific knowledge. We'd be happy to provide copies to any interested researchers. Vextai stared at the communication system in horror. The humans were offering to share their entire scientific database with anyone who asked. They had no concept of technological security. or the dangers of unrestricted knowledge transfer. They're treating galactic civilization like a university, Torvash observed. Because that's what they think it is, Vextai replied. They assume everyone shares knowledge freely and cooperates on research projects. A third message arrived, this one from Captain Park of the Human Military Escort. Galactic Defense Forces, the captain said formally. This is Captain Park of the Earth Defense Corps. We want to assure you that our mission is peaceful, but we are prepared to defend ourselves if threatened. We've studied your available military technology, and we're confident we can handle any reasonable defensive actions. However, we'd much prefer to establish mutual defense agreements and share tactical knowledge. We're particularly interested in learning about galactic warfare conventions and military ethics. We want to make sure our presence doesn't accidentally violate any established protocols. This was the most dangerous message yet. The humans were announcing that they had already studied galactic military capabilities and believed they could defeat them if necessary. But they were framing it as a friendly request for information about proper military etiquette. They're politely informing us that they could destroy our defenses if they wanted. 2, Torvash said with amazement, while simultaneously asking us to teach them how to be better at it. Vextai added. The communication system chimed again. This time the message came from Commander Lee of the Human Cultural Affairs Division. Galactic Cultural Council, she began warmly. This is Commander Lee. We're incredibly excited to learn about your different cultures and traditions. We've prepared cultural presentation materials about human civilization, including our history, art, music, literature, and social customs. We'd love to arrange cultural exchange programs and establish permanent diplomatic relationships. We're also very interested in galactic history and the development of interstellar civilization. We have many questions about how different species first made contact and how galactic society developed. We hope to contribute positively to galactic culture and learn from the wisdom of older civilizations. Vextai realized what he was hearing. Multiple human teams were simultaneously approaching galactic civilization from every possible angle. Scientific collaboration, military cooperation, cultural exchange, diplomatic relations, technological sharing. They weren't just making contact. They were inserting themselves into every aspect of galactic society at once. Sir, Torvash said nervously,